Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hybrid: The Horrors, Hype and How to Make It Really Work. I am Cara Daly. I'm a business psychologist and all-round culture nerd at the Employee Experience Project, and I'm going to be your panel host today. So a bit of a different format for those of you that have been to our masterclasses before. I'm so excited for today. We are joined by such an amazing panel of thinkers and doers who, between them all, have wrestled with the disconnect between policy and lived experience, what's behind engagement dropping, and who bring practical strategies to reshape hybrid so it supports people and performance. So what we're hoping from today's session is that by the end, you'll have tangible ideas to rethink your approach, build clarity and connection, and to kind of challenge that performative compliance that's hurting trust and productivity. So we can all walk away from today's session a bit wiser about what makes hybrid work actually work. So we're going to dive into things like how to design for hybrid, how to really make it work in practice, and we'd also really love to hear from you throughout the session. So I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to come to you with in a moment, and I'd love to hear your responses in the Q&A section. Also going to make sure that we keep nicely to time and hold back 10 minutes at the end of the session so we can answer any questions that you've got. So likewise, if things come up or things come to you throughout the session and you think, oh, that's a question I'd really like to have answered, pop them in the Q&A section and I will come back to them at the end and pose them to the panel. The session's also being recorded, so we will circulate the recording with you all afterwards. So without further ado, I am going to get on with introducing our fantastic panel. But while I'm doing that, sorry, I'm asking you to multitask at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning, which is a bit unfair, but while I'm introducing everybody, I'd really love to hear from you. Just pop in, if you could pop in the chat, what one word comes to mind for you when you hear hybrid work? So while you're doing that, let me introduce everybody. So there is a face on the panel that I am sure that you will all be familiar with, our one and only Paula Brockwell, a chartered occupational psychologist and our chief culture strategist here at the Employee Experience Project. Paula's, as I'm sure most of you know, brings over 20 years of experience helping leaders build trust, shift mindset.
What are we talking about the 24, Cara? Jesus, come on then. Can we just say it's 10 or something? Come on.
Brings many years of experience of helping leaders build trust, shift mindsets and create those conditions for change that truly stick. We've also got the fantastic Simone Fenton Jarvis with us. Simone's a multi-award-winning workplace thought leader and author with 2 decades of experience across facilities, workplace consulting and senior leadership, and she connects the human side of work with practical insight. Don't worry, Paula, it's not just you that I'm giving those decades of experience to. And then we've got Nick Layden as well. Nick is a director of HR at Muckle LLP, again with over 20 years of experience of leading award-winning HR teams across sectors like education, technology and law. She drives Muckle's people strategy, including making hybrid work, and has helped the firm achieve Investors in People Platinum status. And finally, panel rounds off with Maureen Brown. Maureen Brown, if you're looking for her on LinkedIn, Mo otherwise. Mo's a seasoned HR and recruitment leader, and she's the co-founder of MySay. She brings over 25 years of expertise of revolutionising how organisations listen to their people's experience and expectations of work to understand why employees stay, thrive and succeed. So now we've met the panel, it'd be great to hear from you if anyone has got that kind of one word that comes to them when they're, when they hear the word hybrid. Feel free to pop them in the chat if anything comes to you. But while you're doing that, I am gonna throw over to the panel. We're going to start with a bit of a lightning round. So a couple of minutes for each person on the panel, just to talk about one horror, one pain point they see in hybrid work, and one hype, a real opportunity they see in hybrid work. And Simone, I'm going to come to you first, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Oh, horror. I'm going to say meetings. Meetings are an absolute nightmare. They're not working if you're in the office. They're not working if you're in remotely. They're not working if you're hybrid, because the meeting etiquette has gone out the window. So that would be my horror. And then from a hype point of view, I'm going to say that if we get hybrid right, it's enabling true flexibility and true inclusion across the workplace.
Lovely, thank you. Lots of sage nodding. I think you've got some real agreement there. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think for me the kind of the pain point is trying to balance between flexibility and certainty. So I think for ourselves we often want that flexibility, but from others we want certainty, and trying to balance the two doesn't always quite work. So that can be quite difficult to navigate. And I think, you know, it's similar to Simone. I think if we get hybrid right, it can work really effectively, you know, in a really autonomous way, at giving people more opportunity, giving people more flexibility, and actually that's a real positive for a lot of people.
Yeah, completely. Thank you. Paula, how about you?
So I think for me, the horror is the capability gap, actually. It just amazes me how little work organizations have actually done to build that capacity to work and manage in a remote way. So that's the horror for me, that we have the chance to make this work, but we're not building the capability to do it. And I think the hype is about being fit for the future. We've got this whole new generation of people who want work to have a different role in their life, and hybrid remote working could really help to solve that problem. And I don't know why we're not seizing the opportunity, to be honest.
Yeah. And how about you, Mo?
Well, I agree with all of those, but I think I actually wrote 2 pain points down. One is a practical one. I do think that hybrid makes it more challenging to bring new talent into the workforce and into the workplace and develop them. I do think that is a challenge that needs addressing, although I'm a big believer in hybrid, just spoiler alert. But actually perceived inequity was the first thing that I wrote down when I thought about this. I think there's a lot of it in general in the world and in the workplace at the moment, and I think that hybrid can lead to quite a lot of that if not done well. So that would be the kind of horror for me. The hype, I think there's loads of them because I am a big believer in it, but I think the hype for businesses is that it gives you access to people that you just may not have been able to access before. So as a recruiter, for example, you know, when I'm recruiting a specialist HR role, such as a reward role or whatever, in a certain location, the fact that hybrid significantly opens up the market for you to be able to reach people that you just wouldn't have been able to employ before means that you have access to talent that previously was out of your reach. So I think that's a massive plus for businesses.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, everyone. Some really lovely points there that I suspect it won't be the only time that we hear those in the next hour. They're probably going to come up as we're running through our questions. And thank you to everybody who has shared a word in the chat. I'm gonna share some of these with everyone now. While I do, coming to you again, everyone in the audience, jump in the chat again and just share with us what's your biggest hybrid frustration right now. But in terms of the words that are coming to mind when people hear hybrid, we've got adult, we've got confusing, challenge, muddy, yeah, absolutely, and flexibility. So I think they are some words that we can all kind of recognise and resonate with. So while I'm letting everybody sit with that question of what their biggest hybrid frustration is right now, let's kick off with our first question. So Mo, I'm going to come to you first. So I think we still hear people talk about hybrid as the future of work. When people are talking about hybrid in that way, what do you think they're getting wrong?
Loads. I mean, firstly, I think we started working, I mean, my business was always hybrid, so we've always worked that way pre-COVID anyway, and it's always worked really well for us, and it gave me access to people that were frustrated in other recruitment businesses, and I hired some brilliant recruiters on the back of it, and they're still with me now. So I've always been a big champion of it. During COVID, we did some online seminars, and my fear always was that hybrid wouldn't turn out to be hybrid at all, that we had this massive opportunity and we would waste it. And in a lot of cases, that is what I think we're getting wrong. I think as a as leaders, as HR professionals, we still have a tendency to want to policy our way through things and mandate things in order to make them fair. But actually, the whole point of hybrid is that we shouldn't be mandating it. You know, we've fallen into this 3-day, 2-day hybrid, which is essentially no different to a 5-day working week in essence, because you're still telling people when they should and shouldn't be in the office. Now, I understand there's a need for clarity. I do get how important that is, but I just think the biggest frustrations for me and where we're getting it wrong is that I think we're trying to policy through it, which means that it's not really hybrid at all. It's just another kind of set work pattern, which loses a lot of the opportunity. And also the fact that we're still talking about it 5 years down the line and still haven't managed to get it right. I mean, we should just be cracking on with it by now. We shouldn't need this webinar this morning because it's 5 years down the line. We should just all be doing it or not doing it. This is the thing. I think it's turned into this whole we must do it, and if you don't do it, it's wrong. Actually, businesses have always worked in different ways and different roles have always worked in different ways. And we just need to accept that and just get it right for our business, really, and not fall into these weird kind of new policies of 3-day, 2-day, or everyone's in on a Tuesday or whatever it might be. To me, it's just not the spirit of hybrid. If we're going to make it work, do it properly.
It's not a hype or a trend to jump on. It's something to harness if it's going to properly work for you. Yeah, I get that. Simone, I'd love to come to you with the same question, because I'm conscious that you've probably got a differing perspective there, because you're coming at it from a facilities perspective as much as you will be a people perspective.
Yeah, I think the challenge with hybrid and where we're really getting it wrong is the fact that we ironically we're treating hybrid like the destination, and it's like, we're there. And it's how can hybrid be the future of work when it's just how we're working, not what we're working on, when we're working, and everything else. So I think the whole bit around like the destination rather than like the practice of hybrid, like the discipline of being hybrid, the fact that policy is not the way to go about doing hybrid, obsessing over like the desks and the days rather than the outcomes and the progress that's being made. I think that's the big thing. Assuming that technology is going to fix everything rather than thinking about people's mindsets and the skills capability gaps, as Paula said. Tech is an enabler. It's not there to fix all of the problems. And then I think the last really point I'd say is that it's that bit around chasing fairness. Oh, we're all going to do 2 days, we're all going to do 3 days. The whole point of hybrid is that you can make it equitable for everybody rather than being the same for everybody. And I think that's the bit that's really irritating me at the moment, because I've said this a million times over the last few years, and it's that the future of work isn't hybrid. The future of work is all about being human, and the hybrid is just the way that we're going to get there. I feel like I just ranted, but I get passionate. It's driving me mad.
I don't think that was a rant at all. If it was, your rants are far more structured than mine ever are. So I think there's both of you have surfaced some really, really clear pain points there. So I want to kind of pick up on those and come to you, Paula, and say it's a big question. So apologies.
You're not even sorry. I don't believe you for a second.
I know you'll love it. So, chunky question to get your teeth into. Why do you think hybrid isn't hitting the mark in so many organisations, and how do we fix that?
Well, first point, Simone for Prime Minister, I think, is what we need to do. So if the future of work is human, then I mean, just imagine if the future of everything was human, that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? So I have to get that out because that's what's sitting at the front of my head. But I think that Mo and Simone have already alluded to this, but for me, that sense of purpose and outcomes is really important. We're treating hybrid like it's a task, like, that managing by policy, we have to just create clarity about expectation without really thinking about, well, what's the outcome that expectation needs to deliver? And, we see that, I know you see it, Karen, in our culture work so much, where it's like, tell us what good looks like. And we always say, but what do you want to achieve? What is it that you need? And I think people aren't having that conversation about what is it that our business needs to achieve in the next 5 years, what is it that what type of talent do we need, and how do we need them to show up in order to achieve that, and what does that mean then about working location, working modes, both in terms of how we deliver those business goals, but also how we activate and get that talent to the place that we need them to be to drive things forward. And I just do not see people having that conversation, which is why things like the skills and capability gap is allowed to widen. It's why people are chucking tech at stuff and are confused about why it's not working, because we're not having the right conversation. We're saying, how do we make this seem fair? How do we make the chief executive feel safe, rather than how do we set this business up to succeed in its operating context and goal? So like a lot of things, I think about the effectiveness of work, whatever the challenge that we're looking at, we haven't taught ourselves as businesses, as HR professionals, we aren't even encouraged to have that conversation about what's the outcome. We're taught to manage through process and system and bits of the employee life cycle, rather than what's this overall thing that we're trying to achieve. So that would be my rant of the morning. You know, let's step back, look at the purpose, understand that, and then all of the other stuff comes, because if we're pointed towards meeting that purpose, rather than making our twitchy CEO or whoever just feel a little bit better because they can see some bums on seats, or they feel like they're getting return on the huge rent that they're paying for the next 10 years, then, you know, we're much more likely to get better outcomes. I'm not anti-CEO, just the ones who have got their blinkers on and letting their fear drive them forward. I promise.
So have you, thinking about the twitchy blinkered CEO that you've mentioned, if there's anyone in the audience that has a CEO that might possibly fall into that category, do you have any kind of tips or ideas for how it might be helpful to start those types of conversations with someone who's in that frame of mind and that mindset at the moment?
Yeah, I honestly think it's about having the what are we trying to achieve here conversation, you know, and sometimes I think it's about having that conversation out of the context of hybrid. So if we try and do it when that person is already in that, this is what we need to do mode. My cousin, the HR professional, told me in their business they're doing this, so this is what we need to do, or whatever they're bringing into the conversation, it's really hard because we're trying to counter something that's quite concrete. So I'd be suggesting step back, have that broader conversation out of the context of hybrid, collect that information, help them connect to the purpose piece and the role of activating talent around purpose. How do you make it less about how are we making people happy and more about getting them in a mode of high performance? Have that conversation, let it settle for a bit, and then bring hybrid into that conversation, and you'll be much more likely to make some progress. Not that I'm a sneaky psychologist or anything about these things, but I think you've got to take the progress where you can.
Nice, thank you. So I want to pick up on something that you've mentioned there, Paula, but come back to you, Mo, because I think this is something that I've heard you mention, not just in this session today, around fairness. So some CIPD research released a couple of months ago on flexible and hybrid working, and it was telling us that a third of employers are concerned about people being treated differently, like access to opportunities, career development, progression. So is fairness a factor we should be considering in our approaches, and how might that look if it is?
Of course, it always has to be. I think, you know, at the end of the day, everyone deserves an opportunity to be successful and to do a job that they love and to be good in that job. But I think that we muddle up where we should be focusing on that fairness. So some of the conversations that we've had, I mean, literally over the last 5 years when we've been doing events about hybrid working, you know, these aren't new conversations, are that fairness should be about everybody working in the same way. To Simone's point, it's like, you know, everyone needs to be in 3 days because that's fair. But my honest opinion is that there's always been differences in conditions, in working patterns, in for people doing different jobs in different organizations. You know, if you work in the care world, for example, people working in your care homes are working in very different conditions and on different pay and experiencing work very differently to the people sat in the head office. It's always been a case of the job that you do will have some conditions that somebody else doesn't have. I think perceived inequity is the thing that I think about most at the moment, because I think we live in a world that is more divided than it has been. I know a lot of the HR sort of contacts that I have are talking about rising grievances, and I think that worry is driving organizations to think that they need to mandate more and policy more because people are raising grievances and concerns more. But actually, hybrid is an opportunity to deliver more fairness and access to opportunities to people that didn't have it previously. So I think that we have this need to try and make everything as clear and as consistent as possible. And I'm a big believer in consistency, but fairness, we need to think more about equity rather than equality, and those two different approaches. Fairness does not mean everybody has to be in the office 5 days, or everybody has to be in the office 3 days, or everybody needs to be in on a Friday, or whatever it might be. That actually isn't fairness, because people have different life circumstances, they have different learning preferences, different styles, and the more that we can develop workplaces that tap into those, the better the talent that we're going to be able to attract, and the more successful people are going to be. We just need to think differently about what fairness actually looks like and how it presents itself in the workplace, because just asking everybody to do the same actually isn't fair in itself, even though it feels like the obvious way and the easiest way to say you are being fair. It actually isn't and never has been. So we just need to think differently about what fairness is, but we do need to manage the culture and the communications that sit around that, because people are so used to the old ways of working that we've had, that as soon as you start letting someone be a little bit more hybrid because they've got 3 children at home, or a little bit more hybrid because they live 10 miles further away than somebody else does, or on a horrific traffic route, and you can get more work done if you're at home, people perceive this inequity. So you have to have the right culture, the right leadership, and the right communication to make sure that people understand that it's not unfair. It's just meeting different people's work preferences and allowing them to be the best version of them at work, and therefore more successful for the outcome of the business. And in most cases, when an organisation or a business performs well, everybody benefits.
Yeah, thanks, Mo. That makes so much sense. And I think it comes back to, the point that you were talking through a moment ago, Paula, as well, of what are we trying to achieve from this? And it's that fundamental, how do we allow our people to work in the way that they need to drive the best performance and the best business outcomes? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I suppose that what was occurring to me as Mo was talking there was that understanding of the ideal outcome. I think a lot of the fairness challenge is what we're seeing, particularly post-COVID, that kind of psychological contract misalignment that's in place, where people believe that work is about comfort and meeting their needs, and there's this imbalance that's hitting of, actually it should be about a balance of, yes, a place where you can thrive and succeed and be supported to succeed, but it's also a place where the business needs to do business and you need to contribute to that. And there, again, I just don't think we're having the right conversation at the moment at noticing that COVID knocked that contract out of kilter for a lot of people, and so they're dealing with the I'm going to say the echoes, but it's much the footprint of that, because they're living in a world where people think work should make me feel comfortable, good, safe, etc., because that's what we had to do during COVID, but we've not had that conscious conversation to reset that and rebalance that, which is making it really tricky.
Yeah, and positive experience habituates, doesn't it? So during COVID, we were all, I don't want to say we were all delighted, it wasn't a very nice time, but a lot of people saw a benefit of being able to live their life as well as do their work. And for a lot of people, that really worked. The problem is, though, Paula, you're absolutely right. People got used to it very quickly. And now we do need to reset those expectations to a degree. Hybrid isn't just about being lovely and nice to everybody, but actually it did show that you can make work more accessible to people. And it can mean that some of your brilliant people that you might have lost previously, you can retain and can continue to be successful for you, because you can work in a different way. But you're right, we've never reset that conversation. So it went from everyone in the office to everyone at home, to the minute you ask people to go back in, that's a really bad thing. But actually it isn't.
Yeah.
Spending some time is good.
I don't know about you, but I'm seeing businesses using the pre-COVID excuses for why people can't be out of the office, and you're like, the curtain's back. Oz is out. We know that he's just a man. He's not a wizard, actually. We can't use those excuses anymore because we had the emphasis and the energy to make it work in COVID. So let's be honest about what the real reasons for why we want to do this are. Let's align it to the purpose. So yeah, well, we could vehemently agree with each other all day on this, I think, Mo, to be honest.
We often do.
Yeah.
But I think there's some points from that I want to pick up on, but I'm going to come to you now, Nick, as someone who is working in an organisation who has been making hybrid work for them since pre-COVID days. So it would be really lovely to hear from you and hear your perspective around what great hybrid work actually looks like in practice.
Yeah, and absolutely agree with everything that Mo and Paul has just said there. I think having real clarity on that North Star is a starting point. Where are we trying to get to here, and how can you contribute an impact on that North Star as a team, as an individual? It has to be a starting point. But again, I think that what's really worked for us is we were successful in terms of bringing hybrid in 2018, but actually, we did do that conscious recontracting on the return from COVID because people had developed habits, and we acknowledged that. But we were very clear about the deal up front, what we need and what's important to us, but having really clear expectations, but engaging in those two-way personalized conversations with individuals, because everybody is different. So there isn't a one size fits all. So, we communicated what we expected, and that isn't a one size fits all. For example, our juniors told us that actually it was really isolating for them in COVID, and they want to be back in the office and they want to be there more often because that's how they learn best. So that's great. That's amazing for them. What we also did is we developed something called an agile etiquette, and we did that in collaboration with our people. And that really helped us to navigate COVID in line with our values. So real practical things, that make a difference, because actually, what's really important is that people feel connected still. People feel that sense of belonging with our culture. And actually what we found is that in some cases, people were feeling a little bit of a disconnect. So we said, what does this look like? What does good agile working look like for all of us? And how can we be really respectful to each other working in this hybrid world? A practical example of that is we were finding that some individuals weren't comfortable putting their camera on, other individuals were, and that really didn't feel good for some people. So we said, actually, just consider, if you are on a call with colleagues, putting your camera on, creating that space to get to know individuals and creating that space for connection, at the start of team meetings when you're on a call is a really important part of that. But what we also did is have personalized one-to-one conversations with individuals. We talked about, this is what we need as a business. This is what we need as a team. How does this feel for you? What does this look like? And we were really open and honest and saying, we appreciate that actually you now might have established a habit of, your gym day might be a Wednesday, and that's really important to you. But actually for us, we're going to need to flex a little bit on that. But we will give you a period of transition to think about how we can work together and what we can do differently in what's going to work for a team, and involving people in the solution, because a tele approach just doesn't work. So I think what's worked for us is giving people that freedom and choice within a framework, but also being able to check in as well, and having the outputs and in terms of well-being, because I think one of the things that's really worked for us is we do track how often people are in the office, out of the office. And what we find is that when people have a pattern where they've maybe been in the office, had a presence in the office, but then that completely drops off, they're consistently working from home, there's almost always something going on with that individual. And I think one of the challenges is, when you're working in this hybrid world, when you're sat next to someone, you can visibly see that they're not okay, and you can say, are you okay? You don't always get that. So I think it's been really conscious about how we're looking after people's well-being in a hybrid world as well. So just some thoughts from me on that.
Thanks, Nick. Listening to that brought to mind the words we were getting people to share at the beginning, and somebody shared the word adult, which I think probably just really nicely epitomises everything that you've just described there. Simone, I'd love to come over to you just to see what you've in the work that you do with organisations, what you've seen working really well in practice in this space.
Yeah, sure. I've got whiplash from nodding so much. I think the major things that I'm seeing is that hybrid work done right, it's about rhythm. It's about finding that rhythm, and it's almost like the equivalent of you go on a car journey and it's all green lights, and you think you get there and you're like, oh, that was nice. And every time you get stuck in traffic or there's a red light, it's friction, and it's just like, oh. And it's about the green light experience in hybrid and actually designing it in a way that it doesn't feel like friction. So I think in the work that I've been doing, the bit about clarity, what is it we're actually working on? Like what genuinely, like what are we actually doing here? What is the purpose? But then right into what is the purpose of the office? What is the purpose? What work do you do when you're working at home? What do you do when you're in the office? Because too many times I'm going in organizations and there's people sat on the same Teams call with headphones on, sat next to each other. And like you look down and there's like 5 people, and guys, just get a room. Like you 5, you're disturbing the whole office. And actually, you then when you dig into it and they say, "Well, I've been on Teams calls all day," you think, so why have you come to the office to sit on Teams calls all day? And why is your calendar designed in that way? So I think it's about purpose, clarity, creating the moments that matter. So when you are together, you are being intentional about how you connect with people. And it could be, this is where technology is great, because it could be, oh, all my 5 favorite people are in the office on Thursday, and you message them and say, should we all get lunch? Because I can see that, on the technology, we're all in the office on Thursday. Or do you fancy a drink after work? Or like the good old days, just connecting with intention rather than just kind of like passing like ships in a hybrid way. I think the inclusivity by design bit is really crucial as well. Making sure that inequity isn't happening because of the technology is not right or the meeting space isn't right. And if somebody is hybrid, they join in a meeting where 10 people are in a room and is all they can see is just like silhouettes, and they can hear mumbling and people having side conversations, and they're sat on the call kind of going, right, and then or they'll go, oh, let's just everyone get some post-it notes, and there's someone sat on the end of the call just going like, what am I meant to be doing? So I think we can design our experiences in a hybrid world better than we are doing. And then I think my final point would be that when we are in the office, understanding the purpose of the spaces. Too many times I've had organizations saying, this row of desks here, these comfy seats, we need to put plug sockets in. And I'm going, let's just get to the why. Why do you need plug sockets in this environment? And when you dig under it, it's because people are misusing the space. They're sat in spaces that are designed for maybe 1 to 2 hours collaboration. They sat there for 8 hours, and they're all going home like croissants, basically, like prawns bent over double, because they've been sat in a space that's not designed for them. They've been using one screen and therefore they're squinting. And then you get into loads of other issues around well-being, and it's because they don't understand how the space is meant to be used. It's that you can go back to skills capability again, but there's definitely like a massive training piece that's missing. If I go to a coffee shop, I know that I'm only going to work in that coffee shop for probably 2 hours maximum, because otherwise I will go home and need a massage. And it's just knowing how we use that space. Is it ergonomically designed for us? And are we going to connect with people in the right way? If you're going to a collaboration space to concentrate, that is just going to stress you out because there's people talking. So actually, is there a quiet space, and do you understand the purpose of that quiet space? Is there someone sat in a quiet space thinking, I'll do my Teams call here because it's quiet, not realizing it's meant to be a quiet space? So it's all of these things, and it's the green lights. How can we just make all of these little pain points go away? Because they can all go away if we're intentional about it all.
Yeah, purposeful design is only purposeful if it's then effectively implemented. Yeah, completely hear that. Thanks, Simone. So I'm going to take us, we've been talking in the space around how we design for hybrid, and I'd like to take us out now and into thinking, like really diving into thinking about how we really make it work. Sorry, Simone, no rest. I'm coming back to you with this first question I've got in this space. I'd love to hear a bit from you around how you think leaders should show up or need to show up differently in a hybrid world.
I go back to the strong ties and weak ties, and I'll quickly explain that. When you was in the office back in the day, in the good old days, you would have strong ties with people that you would see regularly, and it would be, you don't necessarily work with them, but you know that is that person in finance. And if you ever needed anything from finance, you're going to go to that person because you see them all the time, and you do that friendly nod, and you might talk to each other at the coffee machine now and again. It's a link. Whereas now that link isn't there because you're not having them kind of coincidental bumping into people. You're actually you almost your pool as like weakened, and it's become smaller because your connections are only with the people that day to day you're now working with. If you're not seeing them people face to face, or kind of going, oh, who's that new person that started? Because now you don't even know a new person's even started if you're not on a Teams call with them at some point. So I think the bit around the leader really is about how they curate that kind of connection to make sure that the ties in their team stay strong, and that when you then do go on a cross-departmental kind of project, there's not this friction around like, oh, I don't understand the way that they are. I don't understand, the way that they communicate. I don't trust them because there's not a like familiarity there. So it's almost like, how does the leader make sure that people stay familiar and connected? And I think that is a massive role of the hybrid leader. I think the next bit would be communication. In a very human way, rather than just, our communications manager has prepared this statement earlier. It's about actually just being a bit more empathetic, transparent, really getting to, you know what, we are a business, and being honest about the fact that we are a business, and if we don't earn money, you're not going to have a job, guys. So we do need this bit of flex. And it has to be fair both ways. It's not all about you, in the harshest way possible, coming from the person that's human centric, the irony. But it's human centric done right is about people plus profit equals performance. Because without the profit bit, that's not human centric if we're all getting made redundant. So it's about the realism bit around, and leaders really need to communicate, not just sit there and go, HR said you need to do this, so that's what we're doing. And it's like, no, you're the leader, own it and get your team on board because you're there to lead. And then I think the other one would be really is leaders are there to model behaviors. The whole thing that I read the other day around from Maureen, and I think it was all around people leave leaders, they don't leave the company. And I'm like, no. They also, they leave the company because actually they're not having this experience around what they need to have. And a lot of that is then modeled through their leader. So the first point of touch is the leader's got to get it right. So let's remove that kind of thing around people leave the leader, not the company, by the leader being a good leader and modeling, boundaries, modeling no emails at 11 o'clock at night, just simply delay send. It's fine. If you want to work at 11 at night, fine, but don't put the pressure on everybody else to then see that as they're getting into bed and then think, oh, now I've got anxiety because I've got to deal with this in the morning. All them kind of things. And then I think, my final point would be the psychological safety bit. Knowing your people and having that environment that people come to you when they need to talk to you and they're not scared of talking to you. That is a really, really important thing to have. Having the ability for people to trust you and they feel like they're not on eggshells. I think from a well-being point of view, when it's a lot harder in a more fragmented way to understand, are people truly okay? You need to have that environment where people feel like they can come to you when they are struggling. And that adult to adult relationship bit, I think that's part of, I'm going to leave the psychology to the psychologist, but I think there's a lot around that transactional analysis that's going wrong at the moment, because we are treating people like children and then getting annoyed when they don't behave like adults.
Yeah. Thanks, Simone. And I want to pick up on a little bit of that you've kind of talked through there and come to you, Nick, just to hear your thoughts then on the role that you think things like role modelling, storytelling and behaviour play in making hybrid work for the specific kind of business environment that the organisation is looking to create for.
Absolutely, I agree with everything that Simone said, and I think, you know, it's really important to remember that, you know, 70% of the climate that people experience is from leaders. So, you know, having that real level of awareness and responsibility as a leader is critical, I think, in the success of hybrid working, and role modelling is a huge part of that. You know, if you're asking people to be in the office because that's when they learn best, and then you're not in the office for them to learn from, then you know, it's not great role modelling. But just to pick up on some of Simone's points as well, I think what is really, really critical is taking the time out up front to get to know people as individuals. You know, what they look like on a good day, what they look like on a bad day, what gets on their nerves, how do they like to be managed, what do they need from you as a leader in that space, and what do you need from them? Because that's where trust starts, that's where adult conversation starts. And actually, that, I think, is the real anchor for building a fear-free organisation, where people can come to you and say, I've made a mistake, and you know, you listen, you work through it together. And I think when your actions really, you know, demonstrate that story, then that creates a narrative in the culture that people remember, because actually you're bringing your values to life. It's not just, well, we want you to come and tell us if you made a mistake, or, well, I did that and then this happened. Actually, no, I made a mistake, we worked through it together, you know, I took ownership for that, I put the solution in place, but my manager enabled me to do that. People remember how you make them feel, and that's really important. And that connection piece is huge in that, because how can you impact how someone feels if you don't have a connection with them? And how can you have a connection with them if you don't understand the person in front of you? So I think for me, that connection and belonging piece, and having great conversations is a critical piece of the jigsaw in terms of making hybrid work effectively.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. So I think what I'm hearing, it sounds like cultural alignment. Be a bit criminal if I didn't come back to you with this one, wouldn't it, Paula? So what's your take on how we make sure, I guess, what's being said on paper is supported in practice?
You know, I've got so much to say about this, my brain's stopping for a second, but I think there's two pieces that I would take from what people have said today, but also what I just say play out in practice. One is, we need to stop seeing design as the end point. Just because we've created something doesn't mean people are going to use it. To Simone's example on workplace design, to what Nick's talking about in terms of really making sure that your leaders understand their role of getting to know and activate their team, the policy is not enough. So we've got to, if we want anything to work, hybrid or any other cultural piece, creating the values, creating the policy, creating the playbook isn't enough. We need to create a sense of activation and implementation, build the capability and the accountability in our business to drive that forward. So if you want it to live, you've got to create the mechanisms to make it live and make it an implementation. So that would be my first point. And the other thing I would say is just absolutely coming back to what Nick said already, is enablement. You know, I think a lot of managers and leaders over the years have we haven't helped them get the definition of what their role is right. They think that it's okay to manage and lead based on their own preference. All of the typology personality tools is, oh well, I'm being a bit red today, and we use that as an excuse rather than seeing that we're an agent of the organization, and our job isn't to check up on people in some cultures or keep people happy in other cultures. Our job is about enabling those people to deliver results for the organization. And if we can get that contract right with our leaders and our managers, they're working in service to creating an environment where people succeed. So whether that's hybrid and actually looking at modes of working and different ways of working to allow that to succeed, or more broadly. So yeah, that, do it as a job to be done, an outcome to deliver, not something to design, and get your leaders to play a role, be in service to the delivery of that goal, and you'll succeed, would be my view, really.
Thank you. So building on that, Mo, are there practices that you see or you recognise in your work that you think help or hurt kind of hybrid execution in practice?
Yeah, I was just listening to what everyone was saying there, and I made some notes actually that weren't in my original thoughts of what I would speak about today, but Simone referenced something that we put out earlier this week about people leaving leaders. In my say, we do a lot of exit interviews and starter interviews. We do other surveys as well, but that is the most of what we do. And what has been really interesting is the change in feedback around managers and leaders since COVID, since hybrid became more prevalent. Pre kind of hybrid and COVID, when we would read feedback about managers, and there is a distinction between managers and leaders, I think that needs to be made here as well. So when people were giving us feedback about managers, it was often really negative. And that kind of saying of people leave bad managers, definitely we would have supported that pre-COVID. Post-COVID, it has switched, and it has stayed switched. So we see people being very complimentary about their managers. Obviously not every manager, but generally my manager tends to be one of the top 2 areas of employee experience amongst starters and leavers across the board at the moment. And people love it when they can say my manager has been supportive, my manager cares. Those are the kind of top sentiments that we see with managers. But often people are coming out to bat for their manager because they're saying the leaders are making it really difficult for my manager to do a good job. Now, the biggest thing we see about leaders is often either the lowest or the second lowest area of employee experience near learning and development. And what we see is visibility. So being the issue. So we see leavers saying that visibility was awful. They don't know what is actually going on in the business. They don't communicate, that they've never seen them for ages. They don't feel that they really understand what people are experiencing in the workplace. And then we have starters not being so negative, but really showing a large degree of ambivalence towards leaders. So that's where we see the most amber in our survey results. It's not that they don't think the leaders are visible, it's that they don't know who they are, even within and we speak to people generally at about 3 months in, and a lot will say, yeah, I've not met them yet. I don't know who they are. Now, they're not saying that negatively at that point, but actually they're saying it, yeah, no, I don't know them. And at that point, they're quite ambivalent about it, but obviously then that grows as time goes on. So I think what I was thinking with regards to actually making it happen in practice is that it is down to culture. It's the same with everything, with the Employment Rights Bill and everything coming in. You're not going to policy your way through it. You're going to have to culture your way through it. And in order to culture your way through it, you've got to have a proper listening strategy. That means that people can speak and do have good methods of communication, and you have to make the distinction between leaders and managers, and leaders have to become more accountable, more visible, more walking the walk, more owning those values and living the values, because more often than not, people don't feel that they are, and they then blame the leadership for the poor experience their manager is having, and the fact that the manager can't do one-to-ones and everything else. They don't blame it on the manager. They blame it on the leadership, putting so much pressure on the manager that the manager doesn't have time to do it. And I think if you think about the world of hybrid, if we are on online meetings, the person we're most likely to speak to in that online meeting is our manager. But how are we getting that connection and that clarity and seeing those leaders live those values if we're not seeing the leaders? So it's about how do we make sure that leaders are being visible in this new world they're going to have to be, because it is impacting engagement and experience.
Thanks, Mo. So I'm keeping an eye on time, like I promised I would. We've got 10 minutes left, but I can't see any questions that have popped in the chat yet. So I'm going to be sneaky and throw in the kind of final discussion point that we had, but I'll keep an eye on the Q&A. So if anyone has got a question, pop it in now and I will make sure that I address it. But Nick, I want to come back to you and kind of ask a fairly broad brush question around, how do you know if your hybrid approach is working? What is it that you're going to see?
I think you've got to look at the data. I think, what are the outputs? Like we said at the start, are you achieving what you set out to achieve? That can be quantitative measures. For us, for example, billing and utilization is a very black and white approach, but actually, those well-being check-ins are but also just asking your people. We've just done a big full workforce session with everyone, and we've said, look, we want to check in with you and see how this is working, because we're moving to multi-site. What do you see, hear and feel that's getting in the way for you as an individual, for you as a team? Let's sort of work through that. And what do we need to stop, start and continue doing? So really, again, having those open two-way communications and saying, what does success look like? And then what's kind of getting in the way for us, and working through that. And I think, again, as I said at the start, sort of involving people in the solutions. One of the really practical things that came out of those sessions was diary management. Actually, people saying it's really frustrating that actually I don't really know where that individual is at any point in time, because they're not updating their diary. And then I've come into the office because they said they were going to be in the office and I wanted to have this face-to-face conversation. Then they've decided to work from home, and that's really, really annoyed me. So I think it's just looking at, what's the feedback and really working through the solutions together. And I think, people will only change if they want to change and they see a reason to change. And just coming back to what we said at the start, kind of telling people what to do is just simply not going to work.
So picking up on your point there around data, Paula, I'm going to come to you with this one. If your data is categorically telling you that you need to shift your approach to hybrid, how do you approach getting your leaders on board if there is that kind of breakdown in understanding there?
Well, I think Nick just demonstrates what an exceptional professional she is by the first piece of data point that she talked about there. What does the organisation care most about? It cares about what it's there to do. In Nick's organisation, it's about billing and utilisation. I know it's not just about that, Nick, but I think there is a baseline headline measure. If you anchor your data to what your executives care about, they will listen to you. If you go and have their people aren't very happy conversation, then even when people care about that, even when they really care about that, that is not the thing that shareholders or regulators or the like are pushing into their top three every day. So we have to have the conversation that fits in those people's top three, because it does link. We just don't make the link enough, I think. So use your data to make the link and have the conversation, tell the story about how you influence the things that are in those people's top three, and they'll really come with you.
Thank you. So keeping an eye, doesn't look like we've had any questions, although there is a pain point that somebody shared earlier, and as we've got time, I'm gonna throw it out to all of you if you've got any kind of thoughts on it. So one of the pain points that one of our attendees has shared is the realities of balancing, the commercial reality of big rents versus the need for flexibility. Any thoughts on kind of managing that challenge or frustration of hybrid?
I can take that if you like. So I've recently worked with an organisation where we've actually just kind of finished the project, but looking at the data afterwards now, we've done £2.4 million of cost avoidance. Now, a lot of that was from them big rents, subletting space out. And I think you can, if someone at some point in that organisation has decided that it was a great idea to sign a 10, 15, 25-year lease, which I have seen, which is just blows my mind a little bit. If someone has made that decision, you can't now punish the people in that organization with that mistake, because actually you're paying for that mistake, but don't pay for that mistake even more by then impacting engagement, well-being, retention, the way that your culture is. You've got to kind of just take it on the chin a little bit and go, well, we made that decision 6 years ago to extend the lease, and it is a big rent, and yeah, it's costing us a lot of money to have this space. Well, what do we do about it? Don't just kind of go to the first obvious thing of let's just get bums back on seats and then everything will be fine, because presenteeism will be alive and kicking very quickly. And I think we've got to go deeper and go, well, how can we make this a place where people want to come? So first start with that. How do we get people to want to come to this space? Rather than being a bit like victim mode of, oh, people not come to this space. Okay, what we're going to do is kind of like be petulant and force them back. No, that's not going to solve your problem. So if you've got these big rents, look at how you can repurpose your space. I've worked with one organisation that turned a whole floor into literally a coffee shop. And it was literally and they did all these discounts with friends and family can come in. It was on the ground floor of the building. And it was basically a bit of it became a commercial entity in fact, eventually. But it's about repurposing that space and going, well, what can we do here? And we're one that put a creche in, and I mean, that sounds like my absolute nightmare, but it's things like that that would help people come to the office, because they're going, well, actually, like, we've done this with this space. Fair enough, that was in America, which is why I called it a creche. But it's these kind of thinking outside the box a little bit. When it comes to, well, we're paying the rent, so what do we do about it? Don't just go back to that, get bums back on seats, get creative and speak to people, connect with the people. I think a big part of all of everything that we've been saying today is about citizenship. It's not all about us, and actually knowing that people around us learn from each other, and we've got a duty to go into the space, because we might not need anything from anybody else, but that doesn't mean that they don't need something from us. And it might be mentoring, it might be a quick question, it might just be a friendly face and to talk about the latest thing on Netflix. But people need that connection. So actually we need to just remember it's not all about us. And that's what will come into my mind then as Mo was speaking, because there was a bit of a hoo-ha recently around an organisation forcing all their leaders back to the office 5 days a week. And it was, oh, how can you do that? Because then leaders are not role modelling all the behaviour. It goes back straight to the point that Mo raised around all the problems are going back to leadership at the moment, not the day-to-day managers. So I can see why the organisation has followed the data to do that. But people are quick to jump on things.
Yeah. Thank you, Simone, for picking that one up. Right, just a couple of minutes left, so I am just going to conclude and summarise and share a little something with the attendees as well. Thank you so much to our awesome panel attendees today for your thoughts, your insights, and just a downright brilliant discussion. I could quite happily sit here and listen to you talk and facilitate a conversation between you for much longer, but I suspect you've all got lives that you would like to get back to, and our attendees have probably got other things that they need to be doing with their Friday mornings as well. Thank you so much to all of you for attending and engaging with, you know, your thoughts, your pain points, the things that come to mind for you with hybrid. And I just wanted to conclude by just sharing a little reminder before we head off that it is the last few weeks of our launch price for our Culture Changemakers Kickstarter. It's our flagship digital course on the core fundamentals of great culture change. It's packed with video lessons, slides, crib sheets, and reflection and application tools. It's designed to help you build your understanding of what really drives effective culture change, and it gives you a structured system to look at challenges like hybrid in a targeted, high performance focused way. So if that sounds like something that you are interested in, please use the QR code on the screen, and you will be able to access more details about it on the website and sign up there. We'll share some details in the follow-up email that we share with you all post session, which will also have a recording of the session as well. Thank you all so much for joining us. and we look forward to hopefully seeing you at our next masterclass coming up later on in the year.